Well, this week we have a wonderful, gorgeous lady. It's Katherine Mc Bean, who's well known for her PHA, which is the People's Health Alliance. But she's got another acronym. Is that the right word? The PFF
Initiative, yeah.
initiative, PFFA, which stands for what, Catherine?
People's Food and Farming Alliance.
Oh, brilliant! That sounds cool. Did you come up with that idea?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wicked.
The
Well done.
concepts of both were mine,
Yeah,
but it's very much taken the help of incredible volunteers to make it
yeah,
happen.
yeah. And that's what I think your great strength is, which is what a lot of people say. And obviously, I've watched you over the last few years. Is bringing people together, and it needs only certain people can do that successfully, can't they?
Yeah, I think that the benefit comes from having had a long time to think about it. So I wasn't just trying to come up with the concepts and the ideas straight off the bat and then engage people. I also think timing plays a massive role, because I tried to do something similar back in about 2014, I think it was, called Community Compassion, which again was about that decentralization, about people starting to do things for themselves, look after each other, create their own ways forward. But the timing wasn't right. I got certain people engaged, but only for so long. Now we're in a very different era, if you like, at a very different time. Energy is very different. People are thinking very differently. So it was the right time to do it. Would have been lovely if we could all got moving earlier, but hey, we're here now, so we've got to make the most of the situation we're in.
Yeah, so that's really good that you've kind of left it on the back burner until. Is that an intuitive thing? It's the right
Yeah.
time to do it. Yeah, a lot of people are changing and they can see the more truths as things move on. But we won't go down that road. What's the PFA, FPFFA? Because I'm quite I do like my farming and countryside and all sorts of stuff like that and things. So it's really this is a great interest to me. I've noticed it's about sort of growing your own for some people. What else does it involve?
So it's overall is about food sovereignty, but also moving forward how we farm, how we grow food, how we distribute that food, how we process that food. We're currently, I sort of woke up over 20 years ago, and the start of that journey, the trigger, if you like, for me was working within the grocery sector. And I started to see the supermarket, some of my clients were small food producers, little family businesses, been doing it for donkey's years. And I was there for a few times at different clients when the supermarkets would turn up to do the audits and have the meetings and the conversations. And so we're going a long way back. And I wasn't liking what I was hearing. I wasn't like I'm very good at understanding communication and understanding energy and what people are putting into that. And you could pick up straight away from these guys that it was a very controlling approach. It was a very under the guise of lots of smiles and, hey, you're going to make a lot of profit and this, that, and the other. There were elements that immediately were red flags for me. And I don't think anyone else saw it at the time. And I was young and a bit naive, but it didn't leave me that niggling feeling that something's wrong. We've got a potential monopolization situation here going on. And then when I started understanding a bit more of how they were trying to change farmers and move them from what had always been a more traditional mixed farming approach to one more of a monocrop, monoproduct culture, again, alarm bells went off. So I spent a number of years going down certain rabbit warrens. And then I was so incensed by it and concerned by it, because obviously we didn't have the information front and center like we do now on the internet and so forth. There wasn't that information available. So you had to do like feet on the ground research. So I created my own consultancy and got myself into a position where I worked with a number of agricultural companies, which would link me up to various different sectors, various different farmers, growers, rearers, producers, all the rest of it, and did a lot of investigation. And unfortunately, it turned out that what I was concerned about was a real thing. And we find ourselves now in 2024 where the market is absolutely flooded in terms of the supermarkets having the control, from a retail point of view. And farmers are now finding themselves cornered and controlled by the big processing units and by the supermarkets. And as a result of that, they're screwed financially, through the contracts, through the cost of living, and through DEFRA legislation and other things that have been brought forward to make their lives incredibly difficult. So it's very difficult to have a conversation with a farmer about changing how they farm when their backs are against the wall. It's almost panic mode right now. We're going to have food shortages later this year if we don't get the spring crops and potatoes in the ground. So there's a lot of stress these guys are under. So what we do at PFFA initially is focus on three areas: grow your own. Let's get everyone growing their own, every capacity you've got available to you. Community growing groups. And we're bringing under that fold community farms very shortly, encouraging more community farms. We've got farmers out there who can't farm all their land. They don't have the money and they don't have the time in which to do that in the way that the government want them to do it. So some are able to hand over a small parcel of a few acres to local communities who can then form their own farms, and they can then utilize all of the different elements that they want in terms of making sure they're taking care of the soil. And we're doing things in a way that works with nature and with human health, rather than against it, which is what we've seen happening in recent years. And then the third element of it is farmers and producers. And it was always very much part of our vision to move farmers back towards a more mixed farming approach. So the benefits being much better soil health because you're running the livestock or the animals in a certain way, in a certain rotation that works with certain crops you're planting or certain veg you're planting, whereby their waste works well for the soil and for that produce, and they will pick that over. You'll see them. We won't have build up of certain diseases and things like that, which you get in a monoproduct environment. So you don't need to be using all the chemicals and all of the inputs that you would if you were a conventional farmer. So there's a lot of benefits to doing it. And this is something I dreamed up years ago and have been passionate about for a long time. But again, timing had to be right. So we launched in September 2022. And the Grow Your Own, the community growing groups in the last year or so since we launched just went, just absolutely exploded. And on our website, people can find lots of information on how to get started. If you haven't got a Scooby-Doo, go and have a look at the website. But there's a plethora of references out there. There's loads of information available to support your growing journey, but I would suggest everyone do it. Not that I'm a fearmonger, far from it. I'm very optimistic, but we are going to potentially have a big potato shortage this year. Potatoes are easy to grow. You can survive on potatoes if you had to. It's not great, but you can survive on potatoes. So I'd say start with spuds. Start with spuds, guys. Get them in. I grow mine sometimes in those bags you get at the supermarket, the life bags for life bags. And I literally put a few holes in the bottom, put a bit of soil, shove some potatoes in. I've left at the back of the cupboard who sprouted, and then just keep topping up the soil as the leaves come through. It is that simple. So yeah, that exploded, which was fantastic. And then I came away from PHA back into the PFFA room at the beginning of this year, just as the European farmers were kind of kicking off and letting their voices be heard. And it's become increasingly apparent that we don't necessarily have all that many farmers in the UK who are aware of the bigger picture issues that are out there. Maybe they've fallen into believing the net zero narrative, climate narrative, and a lot of their subsidies are now reliant on them taking action to support those narratives. So it's very, very difficult for farmers to wake up at the moment. But what we're doing is now looking to set up regional ambassadors across the UK who can go and connect with farmers and growers and have these conversations, get this information in front of them. We've recently launched a video that's on our YouTube that gives an overview for farmers as to the issues that they're facing, and it's specialists in their area who are talking. And then we did a public forum, which again is on our YouTube. So people in the public can start to understand how we tackle these issues. Some of the biggest problems farmers got is even if they realize the full extent of the situation, their backs are against the wall. They don't have routes to market. They don't have local processing anymore, even down to the abattoirs, the mills. All of these have become centralized and they're very few and far between. So we need communities to come together and get these processing units, these retail outlets, and there's a number of different ways you can do that, from bot schemes to farmers markets to actually an industrial unit where you just sell on behalf of the farmer, literally, you know, almost field to plate situation there. So there's a number of different ways communities can get involved, but the farmers cannot do it all. They cannot grow the food and then be expected to create these routes to market, these retail outlets, these processing units. It's down to us to do it. And PFFA want to play a massive role in helping to make that happen.
That is amazing. There's lots of information there for me to try and think of.
Sorry, it just spills
Oh
out.
no, that's great. It's nice to see your passion, and it's good to hear your ideas. It's great. I mean, this has been going on a long time. I've just been reading this actually. Illustrated History of Tractors. I've got GCSE, two A levels, which was an advanced GMQ, and a degree, honours degree in farming. So I've been on quite a few farms and fisheries and all sorts. And yeah, it just seemed to be mechanized at one point. I think it was just quite standardized. Small fields, lots of hedgerows, local communities, markets throughout the whole of Europe. Although it's quite similar, it's quite still quite similar. A good example of that's northern Spain, where I've driven through. It's amazing. Every farm has its own granary and stuff like that. They've
Yeah.
all got cows, and that's how to do things. But as soon as tractors came along, soil got compacted. They've ripped up all the hedgerows, all the woodland, all the lakes got filled in, and so they can make more field and have monocultures. And that's not how nature works. So I'm, as much as I've been in the farming industry, I've seen it firsthand, and I think it is actually going back to that, which is a bit of a dichotomy, not dichotomy. It's a bit of a the whole set aside thing. Yeah, is taking land away, but I mean, I've seen it change. Being devil's advocate, so you've got parts of a field where nature can interact. But yeah, it does have to change big time, especially with planting nitrogen fixing plants and then rolling it on. But a lot of it revolves around profit, doesn't it? And it's all squeezed by the supermarkets, and the muscle then comes in with DEFRA and environment agencies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
yeah, as you said, their backs are against the wall. If they can't make money, they're screwed. So
It's like every regulator across the UK in the last 4 years, it's become increasingly apparent that they're all working for an agenda that it doesn't really suit the people of the country.
yeah.
And DEFRA are very much of the same ilk. I was looking at their budgets the other day because it's fascinating. But I was looking at their budgets the other day, and the amount of money they waste on ridiculous things that have nothing to do with food growth or food security or sovereignty is criminal as far as I'm concerned. It's absolutely criminal. That's our taxpayer money, and you're paying to support initiatives that don't support us eating. Not okay with that. Not okay with that. So this is an institutional issue as well as something that's become very commercially dangerous, if you want, and it is going to be down to us to change it, and that means going to our farmers. The ideal is to literally just take the ignore the supermarkets, ignore DEFRA,
Mm.
but that takes a lot of bravery for a lot of people. So we've got to go through this transitional stage, as we are with every element around us, Toby. I mean, you can see it, everything's transitioning at the moment, and that very much includes farming and food production.
Well, a lot of all the institutions are feeling it now, like the banking sector, for example. And I mean, the supermarkets, it's a huge global business. And I mean, I remember opening, because I do like kind of DJing type stuff and emceeing. I opened a ton of co-ops because Safeway closed all their stores. And basically, they've made smaller mini supermarkets, haven't they, everywhere? I mean, I could name about 10 just in my little town. It's tiny. Um, but yeah, so it's interesting. And also, what's quite apparent about these supermarket chains is they're very greedy because they got banks, Tesco Bank, for example. So they got probably a mix up of some of their staff that are actually doing the legislative legal stuff. That's what you said about crushing the competition and getting things cheaper and stuff like that. So, but the biggest threat to some extent is the corporatization of the countryside, which we've seen with Bill Gates recently. Do you know anything how much he owns, like statistically? It's quite a lot.
Not
In
here in the
America.
US.
Yeah,
There's actual
yeah,
figures and acreage, but I don't know it off the top of my
yeah.
head. But it's profound over there. But over here, I haven't discovered anything. But that's not to say, I mean, in my local area, I'm going to fight a battle soon. There's some people from another country who've come over. They bought a massive amount of land, and they've set up a very, very high level, high priced kind of retreat situation. But it's very self-contained. They grow their own food, they produce their own power. And on the surface of it, you're thinking, yeah, great, super, that sounds wonderful. The result is, though, that they become such a massive local, and I'm in a rural area, local organization that they are literally buying up every farm they can get their hands on. And now what they're doing is going around and kicking the tenant farmers off who've been there for decades.
Mm.
And they're going to use this for some effing retreat for very elitist type people, because I've seen the prices. Not you and I aren't going there for a stay over, it's just not happening. So there is clearly are foreign people coming into the country and buying. I know this is not the first one, but it just happens to be my local one, and buying up land that was previously used for farming. And some of it they are retaining for farming, but it's very specific artisan types of farming to suit those who've got the money in the back pocket to pay the top dollar for very, very highly well produced produce. That's not okay. That's not okay. And so we need to put a stop to this. And I'm in no doubt moving forward that as things change and evolve, we'll get the land back and we'll get it back with blooming bells on, because people will realise the importance of actually, we don't care about you having a great big spa here that employs a handful of local people. We actually want land that will grow food that keeps us alive. So that will change. And I think we'll see a change in more and more people becoming involved with food production at local levels, which I think is essential. We've got a big issue with farmers having mental health problems. I've known about this for a number of years.
Yeah.
And I personally think an element of that, and I'm no expert, but I personally think an element of that is the fact that farmers become increasingly isolated. I mean, farmers aren't always people. They're not necessarily people. And that's okay. That's fine. I mean, we're all different. And there's no criticism to that. But as a result of a combination of that, the amount of hours they're having to work, and the fact that they no longer have a connection, be it production or distribution, with the local community, because it's all being done through the supermarkets and the large processors, they've lost that connection. There isn't that community connection. There isn't that community communication with a farmer. And through PFFA and what we're bringing in, we want to dissolve that as an issue for farmers. We want them to be able to connect. So we recommend you get a group of people in the local community who are very keen to buy direct from their farmer, maybe rent some land off their farmer, maybe just help with the farmer with distribution. But you select one or two spokespeople who've got a bit of an idea maybe of what they're talking about, just even on a basic level. And they reach out to the farmer and hopefully have a meeting and a conversation with him and say, look, we as a community want to buy directly from you. We want to work with you. Is there anything we can do to help you be able to deal more directly with us? What can we do? Can we help you set up a buying group? Can we help you set up some distribution? Can we actually help you by finding local or building local processing units to help you? There's a number of different ways of people looking at this, but it is going to be down to us, we the people. We need feeding. They need to be earning money for what they're producing, which at the moment they're losing money. They don't want to be relying on subsidies. I've not yet met one farmer who wants to rely on subsidies. They want to be self-sufficient. They want to be doing it themselves. But for a transition period at a minimum, they're going to need us. And by people coming in and helping them and them seeing that these people genuinely with love want to help them to help themselves, I'm hopeful farmers will be able to tackle some of the issues that are causing such bad mental health problems at the moment within the industry by having that reconnect with their local community. I live in hope, and I think it will happen because it has to happen.
Did you watch Clarkson's Farm? What did you think of that? I assume you have.
I haven't. I haven't had
Oh, right,
TV
really?
for about 10 years, so I haven't
Okay.
seen it
Yeah.
at all. But I've heard great stories about it.
I think that
But
was
no, I'm
quite
not au
good.
fait with it.
That was good to bring the stress, and especially with the restrictions with TB and stuff, the stress down to the general public. So most of them haven't got a clue. They've never been on a farm. But one thing I learned, well, it was a massive part of I did an land and environment advanced GMVQ. One thing that was a massive part of that was farm diversification, one of which would be leisure. Is that still a thing that farmers can use alongside? They can still farm more food but still run leisure with it. For example, turning a barn into a wedding venue. Is that
Yeah.
something sort of push, telling them?
Yeah, I mean, they can do that. I would actively, personally, suggest, because again, an element of investment has to be involved.
Mm.
So if you're going to invest
Mm.
in doing up a barn, making it suitable as a venue for hosting and other activities, I personally would suggest that they take that investment money and they put it, and this is the trouble with getting the investment money for what they want to use it for, because obviously they're being supported to diversify out of food production. So it's getting the money to put it back into Maybe they don't have never had cattle before, so they'd need some forms of shelter. Maybe they'd need equipment that's not so impactful on the soil because they want to take their field size down. Maybe they need money helping set up the hedgerows and getting proper hedge layers in, and so on and so forth. I would personally rather see their money invested back into food production, and it's how to diversify from a monocrop, monoproduct culture into having that more mixed approach, rather than going monocrop, monoproduct culture. Might try a little bit of mixed because I can't really do much. I haven't got the equipment or the shelter or whatever for it. Let's plow it into renovating a barn so people can come and get married here.
Not just that,
I know
but
which way I'd rather go.
yeah, there's other things like people using the resource for bird watching, let's say, or fishing, and it can kind of run alongside the farm in a very passive manner. That's just one example, the wedding venue, because I'm a
Yeah.
wedding DJ. But I mean, I went to, I mean, it's probably a very bad idea, but no, but a very bad example. But I went to a massive farm the other day, and in the middle of it, they've got a well, not only did they have a rally track, which I drove a Subaru around, it's great fun. It didn't take up much room either, actually. But they had an aerodrome next to it with a huge runway. So that's, I know it's monocultured grass, but around it was all woodland and lakes and all sorts, and they make a huge amount of money. But the rest, that's probably about 5% of the whole farm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I suppose that's one thing. And what about technology? Because I get the impression you want to go back in time in terms of going forward, for example, vertical growing, hydroponics and stuff. What do you think about that? Robotics, dare I say it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of tech. I think
Yeah,
because of the symbolism that I picked up on years ago and how they were planning on using tech to kind of enslave us, and look at how we are.
yeah,
You know, they've done a really good job of it. So I'm a little bit anti-tech, and I take that on the chin. However, I'm also aware that we have an opportunity here to be less impactful on the soil, to go back to more traditional ways of doing things, and it's actually better for the environment, better for the soil, better for the human health and animal health and so forth. But I'm also I'd like to think wise enough to see that there are going to be elements of new technologies that come through that could be helpful. I don't particularly want to see robots on farms. I don't want to see, I mean, these massive bits of machinery cost a fortune as well, and so many farmers are in debt because of the huge combine they've had to buy or the huge tractor they've had to buy, and actually long term that does not benefit anyone. It doesn't benefit anyone. So I would love to, I mean, I'd much rather see, you know, the horses and the plow out back, of course I would. But I'm also realistic enough to know that there's going to be a transition. I would love to see farmers stop investing money they don't actually have into this new machinery, and start looking at making their fields smaller and far more manageable, and then allowing the public and volunteers to be able to come on board and actually physically help them on the farm. Because at the moment, whilst they're using the big combines and the big tractors, the public can't do anything. They're so limited on what they can do because they don't they don't drive these things. They don't know how to utilize this. And I think people would be much more supportive of physically coming in and helping on farm if the farmer's farming in a way that aligns with them. And as people become more aware of the impact on the soil or chemical usage and things like that, they're wanting to move away from it. So if you want the community to embrace you, you've got to try and embrace some of the community's thoughts as well.
yeah. And that's it's a fine line, isn't it, between animal cruelty, sustainability in terms of being at one with Mother Gaia, let's call her, for the nature, and then also making a living through a profession that's been around since day dot. It's fun, and there's different camps of thought that are intermixed as well, I suppose, isn't there? So you got a lot on your plate, haven't you?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, this is why I keep going on, and I will keep going on about people accepting the fact there needs to be a transition.
mm.
Until we've got, I mean, I'm all for decentralization, massively for decentralization. But again, even if we manage to get some really good people in government soon and things start moving in our direction, there's still going to have to be a transition. It's not all going to happen overnight. We've got to be realistic about where people are at and what they can cope with and what that looks like, and the system we've got, where the fragility is, etc., etc. Not that I think about this all the time or anything, but it's the same going to be applied to farmers. There's some farmers that are going to take time to transition over, and we start with what we've got and we go from there. So I personally think that things like animal care and animal health will naturally be improved when you're using the animals in a way that nature has supported them in being.
Mm.
So by keeping, for some places where they keep cows in all year round, that's not going to help your yields. That's not going to help your animal be healthy. That's not going to help your vet bill. Your animal needs to be an environment that suits them. Chickens, keeping them. I mean, I've been to incredible poultry units with the spanking massive sheds, loads of good technology in there, loads, it's very clean. I mean, no getting away from it. These things are spotless. Quite often they're spotless. But those flipping poor birds just stand there like that. They're in somewhere with fake lights. They don't see daylight, so they're in a shed, and it might be very clean and pristine, but there's nothing there for them to dig about in. There's no scrapping about for those birds. There's no behaving like a normal chicken. I found it really distressing being there, and I'm quite hardened, but I found it very distressing being there, having kept chickens for a number of years and seeing them behave in a way that's not natural. We can change that. Put your chickens out there, create a movable run, stick them out there on the ground, let them do what they do best, and you're going to have vibrant, healthy, happy birds producing incredible eggs and meat from allowing them to behave as naturally as they can behave. So, excuse me, none of this is actually difficult. None of it's complex. It's just the transition. We've just got to make it happen. And if we can take decent people into government and we can get our hands on things like the DEFRA budget and stop them wasting that money. If you pour the money they wasted into infrastructure and supporting farmers through this transition for 5 years in the UK, we're done. And we could do that on a year's budget, with DEFRA. But we need to take government for that to happen.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing because I look at things in 50, 100-year periods generally and a bit further. I don't trust a lot of what history that's non-documented history that's told is actual fact because there's no proof that did happen or not. But I think the biggest threat to for the next 20, 30, 50 years to farming is net zero, isn't it? Especially with machines.
Yeah, we've got to
That would
blow
be
that
good.
one.
They'll have to go back to horses, won't they?
Yeah.
Actually.
No, we're going to blow the net zero out the water.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of us very, very determined to do that. A lot of farmers have absorbed this. They believe this. They've been, as we all have at some point or another, been a bit brainwashed by the system.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've got coming out, hopefully in about the next week or so, is an interview with a very, very well-known gardener and a scientist on what geoengineering is, what's the impact that it's having on plant growth, how do we mitigate that? And there are ways to mitigate it. Again, not the actual long-term solution we need, i.e. stopping it, but how we can mitigate things in the meantime so that it's not impacting, because we're watching farmers at the moment. And I think I spoke to someone yesterday. I think they've got 18% of their spring crops in, and they've really only got about another 2-week window at best to get those in because of the weather. So, and also if people are going, well, what's causing the changing climate then? Because it wasn't like this 10 years ago. It wasn't like this 15 years ago. What's causing that? Then you need to show them the evidence that supports, well, actually, it's not net zero. It's what they've been doing up above that's had its impact and made things very difficult for you. And then once farmers start to realize the full truth of what this onslaught that has happened, that's made their lives so difficult, I'm hopeful that they'll just go no, and they'll stick a big finger up at the man, and they'll turn to their community and to us, we the people who are here for them, and say, right, let's make this happen, let's work together. And so we're trying to do or I'm certainly, even as an individual, trying to do what I can to expose the reality so we can start dealing with what we've got in front of us and making the changes that need to happen.
Yeah, good for you. That's great. Especially having experts on your side that can, like Ralph Ellis for the climate stuff, being able to have like this is this. But we've learned in the last few years, people are blinded by conditioning, call it the matrix or whatever. And I went to Sparshot College. I was there for 3 years, and I moved out after the first year because I could not stand the people, and they were all landowners' sons, pretty much. And there was such, this was like 20 years ago, there was such misogynistic, posh boy,
very privileged,
selfish tossers, rugby playing, just wankers. That's the best word to call them. I could not stand them. And I've been in private school my whole life. These are the people that are now own the farms. So do you think they're going to listen to you?
They will or they won't. They will or they won't, Toby. The
Yeah.
world is going to go in a certain direction,
Mm.
and they can either join and get involved with what resonates with them, or they stay where they are.
Yeah.
They can stay where they are. That's fine. And we're not going to get to all farmers. And I know exactly who you mean. I grew up in Dorset. I know exactly the sort of people you're suggesting. And I always found myself kind of on the periphery of those groups, to be honest, because they were there around me, but I wasn't in the same mindset as a lot of them. And I think that is still very much the case. And they'll either catch up or they'll be left behind. And that choice is up to them. We can't ever force, nor should we force anyone to do anything. But if we can get enough people moving in a certain direction, it's going to cause a shift, and they'll either jump on board or they won't.
Yeah, that's good. Good. That's the best way to do it, is not to fight external, but to create something different as you're doing. That's what Richard Vogt said about that. And I like people like that, Catherine Edwards. They're that is the way forward, to create something, especially if it saves people money to start with, but an ethos, you know. And the problem with a lot of the farm shops now is they're still buying it from big companies, but it's too expensive. So how would you educate people into creating or getting involved in actual co-ops, or growing groups, or it's difficult, isn't it? Because they don't know the taste of good food. They don't probably cook from scratch. They just buy stuff that just. I mean, I'm very fortunate. My wife's an extremely good cook, so I do get stuff that's cooked from scratch, and I know the difference between a load of crap you get from Tesco or especially Lidl versus her stuff. You know, how's that going to happen in reality to start with, at least?
So again, I'm going to keep using the word transition, because
Mm.
there has to be one, and people have to accept that before they embark on this journey. Nothing's going to be perfect and ideal straight away. So for me, I'm a single parent of three. I can't afford to buy all organic or locally produced. I can't do that at the moment. That's not the reality. So I do what I can with what I've got. We have a wonderful local market, farmers market, and I can go and get some bits from there. And so I do what I can. But I think what it's like anything, it is that what the market asks for. So the more people that get involved with food production, the price is going to go down.
Yeah.
Farmers need to understand that actually, if they can deal direct with the public, they're going to make a much bigger profit margin. And sometimes this is the way you got to speak to farmers, because they're so struggling so much financially to keep their heads above water. And it's scary. The idea of making such a change is scary. So we've got to take them through it step by step. So people at the moment are going to have to support this in any way they can. Now, it might be that you've grown a load of your own produce, or you get together with a group and form a cooperative. And the details of that are on our website, and how to form community growing groups, how to move forward, what if you come up against issues, so on and so forth. So there's an element of information there. But we will be holding Zoom presentations, want of a better word, soon, on how to create a food hub, for example. So we'll be going a step-by-step guide on what you need to consider, how you need to do it. So we can do so much, but the people have to activate it themselves. They have to get off their butts and do it themselves. And we know that. We've seen so many people brilliantly doing that over the last few years. And I'm sure we'll continue to do so. So when there's a demand, we've got to think about it, and then the supply is there, the prices are going to drop. So if you can keep pushing in a few years, things are going to look very, very different. At the moment, I can't go to a bunch of farmers market. They're too artisan. I can't afford it. But I would imagine in a few years' time, once we brought in a few new processes, we've got a few local farmers on, the produce available in terms of volume is going to go up, which means then that the price can come down, because the farmers can afford to bring the price down, because they're still going to be making a heck of a lot more money than they are now. So we've got to allow for that transition phase. But the sooner people jump in and get involved, the sooner we'll see those prices come down, and then we're all laughing our way to the bank, as it were.
Yeah, talking of banks, we said the supermarkets own their own banks. Do you think they will fight back? Because they have ways to do so. Can't think of any. There's an example. They will cut stuff, and then they've got long-term goals and plans, haven't they? And they've got the money to hold out as well, haven't they?
They have. Good luck to them. Let them carry on. I tend to be like, you do you, sunshine. They're going to push back. They're going to do what they can. They're going to scrape away at it. But there is more of us than them. And
Yeah.
by the end of this year, Toby, I don't know about you, but I've got a really strong vibe that the majority of people are going to be very aware of the full picture. They're going to understand what's happening here. People need to personally be impacted by things sometimes before they're prepared to make change. And I think this will be the year that they start to feel that impact.
Yeah.
Then at that point, we get on and we push the new even harder, even faster, even stronger than we ever have before. And the supermarkets will naturally be left behind. They will lose their power. They will be a nothing burger left unless people want to use them. And I'm not saying there's no place for supermarkets. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm suggesting where they control and monopolize the market, we need to turn that absolutely on its head. So they're at the lower level, if you like, of, it may be suitable and they may change their makeup. They may become more actually like a market, as in a greengrocer section, the butchery section, the baker section, and then, the peripheral stuff as well. But it's got to be driven by consumers, and we, the consumers, have the power. And as soon as people realize that, it's game over for them.
Yeah, yeah. And that was part of the out of. I mean, I remember being a kid doing geography, and one of the first projects I ever did was the impact of out of town shopping centres on
Yeah,
family small businesses. Oh, we're similar ages. You probably did the same thing.
yeah,
And yeah, I remember that hitting me. I remember intuitively thinking, that's right, because we go to Tesco, fill up a great big bloody thing, this concrete car park and stuff, and they've then moved. I think they're not stupid supermarkets. That's why they've made their businesses smaller. So I think potentially they know that the big supermarket days are coming to an end
yeah,
somehow. They're not done. They have analysts like for banks that work for them and statisticians, whatever.
yeah.
Um,
Statisticians, that
I
one. Yeah,
can never pronounce that. So yeah, but they may well follow suit and actually have to, because they will follow the money. If the majority
yeah.
asks for where's this grown, I want to see the farmer. That maybe that will be a thing. And they'll have to.
It might blow up in their faces. I
That'd be
mean, once
great.
people start to understand the way they've treated farmers, the way they've
Yeah.
behaved. I mean, it's a whole separate issue, but I did some investigations some years back, and I'm 99.9% sure that there was some brown envelope situations going on between an upcoming Tesco in the area I lived
Oh yeah.
in and the
Yeah.
local council.
Mm.
People will make a judgment based on ethics and morals and integrity moving forward, not profit, not money. That is not going to be the way forward.
Yeah.
It will change, and I think these guys will be left behind because of the way they've behaved. But that is their own undoing. That's their own work. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, it's a fascinating time to be alive. I wouldn't change it for the world. But we've got to help the people move into a space that works better for them, and that very much includes the farmers too.
One thing I've noticed with regards to the institutions, because it's been on my mind, a lot of these great big companies, let's say pharmaceuticals, they've all got different people that work within them. A lot of people say, oh, they're just evil as an institution, but a lot of people that work within them are just normal people. I've worked for some quite high up people, and they're just nice. They're really nice. So I think as things change on a sort of more spiritual level, let's say, or even just on a cultural level, and people do realize the truth, then hopefully
Yeah.
the people within those institutions, and as time goes on, this is like 30, 40, 100 years, whatever, as time goes on, the older crusty gits will die off,
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
basically,
yeah,
and things will change over time. So yeah, so the
yeah.
future is bright, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
takes people
And
like you.
it's exciting.
Yeah,
And I think people need to, we've got a lot of fear going on at the moment. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of a very unbalanced feelings at the moment, quite understandably. We've got it coming from all angles. But what I want people to take away from this is just how exciting and positive and beautiful and wonderful the future will be from the lessons that we've learned, particularly in the last few years, how we want to change that. And people are stepping into their power. They're understanding, hey, we can do this. We can actually do this and pull it off. And as a result, we're seeing incredible things happen across the world. And I'm so, so excited about what comes next for all of us. And I think if people can remember that and realize that and understand that, you're far more empowered and you're far more ready to move forward and make things happen. And it is going to be exciting and it's going to be wonderful, and we're creating something for our children that is going to be life changing, absolutely life changing compared to the road that they're on. If we stay on the current trajectory, it's not good. It's not good. We don't need to. We're not going to. We're shifting and we're changing and we're moving and we're creating the new, be it health, be it food, be it education, be it economies, whatever that might look like. And the more people that are proactive and get involved, the quicker it's going to happen. And I personally am really excited and optimistic about, what comes next.
The world needs a lot more of you, Catherine, and I thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And
Thank you for having me.
I'm definitely a fan of yours, so, and I'm willing to help you out whenever you need it. So.
Thank you so much. And no, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and more than happy to come on and do a longer version sometime very soon. We've got a couple of campaigns coming up, so maybe once they're launched and they're off and running, I could come back and we could talk about those a little bit or something.
Nice to talk to you. Thanks very much, Catherine. Have a lovely afternoon.
And you. Thank you, Toby. All the best.
Bye.
'Cause I ain't got a brand new combine harvester, and I'll give you the key. Come on now, let's get together in perfect harmony. I ain't got 20 acres, and you got 43. Now I ain't got a brand new combine harvester, and I'll give you the key. Who loves it, baby? Ha! When we a grand couple at that last Wurzel dance.